This is a response to Omed Yashar's response, to my response, to his response, to a Dateline television segment regarding XK therapy. It seems that you didn't appreciate the anecdotal evidence that I put in my video regarding XK therapy being potentially harmful, because it didn't specifically apply to Journey into Manhood. Although I included an alternate article link regarding Journey into Manhood, which could be seen as negative. Now, the reason why I did this was because in the original Dateline segment, Dr. Jack Drescher, who you addressed specifically in your original video, was referring to XK therapy in general as being potentially harmful. So the anecdotal evidence that I presented was to buttress his original point. So it's fine if you reject that anecdotal evidence. I reject your anecdotal evidence that Journey into Manhood accomplishes what you say it does, that being stimulating heterosexual feelings. And I'd also like to address some of the other evidence you think you have regarding XK therapy being effective. I do appreciate that you responded to that Dateline television segment, because at 7:48 to 7:53 of the original video, Dr. Jack Drescher provides a screenshot of the report of the American Psychological Association Task Force on Appropriate Therapeutic Response to Sexual Orientation. I'll provide a link to that in the Sheol bar. I'd like to cite some information which I've gathered from this report regarding XK therapy and regarding the Spitzer report, which you mentioned in your most recent response. This is from page 27. There is a small, more recent group of studies conducted since 1999 that assess perceived effects of sexual orientation change efforts, hereafter abbreviated as SOCE, among individuals who have participated in psychotherapy, as well as efforts based in religious beliefs or practices, including support groups, faith healing, and prayer. There are distinct types of research within this recent literature. One type focused on evaluating individuals' positive accounts of sexual orientation change. Nicolosi et al. 2000, Schaefer et al. 2000, Spitzer 2003. Page 29. With the exception of prospective ethnographic studies, the recent research relies exclusively on uncontrolled retrospective pretest designs. In these studies, people who have been exposed to SOCE are asked to recall and report on their feelings, beliefs, and behaviors at an earlier age or time, and are then asked to report on these same issues at present. Change is assessed by comparing contemporary scores with scores provided for the earlier time period based upon retrospective recall. In a few studies, licensed mental health professionals who perform SOCE reported their view of how their clients had changed. The design is problematic because all of the pretest measures are not true pretests, but retrospective accounts of pretest status. Thus, the recent research studies on SOCE have even weaker designs than do non-experimental studies from the early period of research on SOCE. Again, none of these recent studies can establish whether SOCE is efficacious. An extensive body of research demonstrates the unreliability of retrospective pretests. For example, retrospective pretests are extremely vulnerable to response shift biases resulting from recall distortion and degradation. People find it difficult to recall and report accurately on feelings, behaviors, and occurrences from long ago and, with the passage of time, will often distort the frequency, intensity, and salience of things they are asked to recall. Retrospective pretests are also vulnerable to biases deriving from impression management, change expectancy, and effort justification. Individuals tend to want to present themselves in a favorable light. As a result, people have a natural tendency to report on their current selves as improved over their prior selves. Impression management. People will also report change under circumstances in which they have been led to expect that change will occur, even if no change actually does occur, change expectancy, and will seek to justify the time and effort that they have made in treatment to reduce any dissonance they may feel at experiencing no or less change than they had expected by overestimating the effectiveness of the treatment. Effort justification. Effort justification has been demonstrated to become stronger as intervention experiences become more unpleasant. In combination, these factors lead to inaccurate self-reports and inflated estimates of treatment effects, distortions that are magnified in the context of retrospective pretest designs. Page 37. Recent studies have investigated whether people who have participated in efforts to change their sexual orientation report decreased same-sex sexual attractions. Again, the Spitzer report is cited, or how people evaluate their overall experiences of SOCE. These studies all use designs that did not permit cause and effect attributions to be made. We conclude that although these studies may be useful in describing people who pursue SOCE and their experiences of SOCE, none of the recent studies can address the efficacy of SOCE or its promise as an intervention. Page 49. Participants' interpretations of their SOCE experiences and the outcomes of their experiences appeared to be shaped by their religious beliefs and by their motivations to be heterosexual. In Schaefer et al. 2000, people whose motivation to change was strongly influenced by their Christian beliefs and convictions were more likely to perceive themselves as having a heterosexual sexual orientation after their efforts. Schaefer et al. Also found that those who were less religious were more likely to perceive themselves as having an LGB sexual orientation after the intervention. Some of the respondents in Spitzer's study concluded that they had altered their sexual orientation, although they continued to have same-sex sexual attractions. These findings underscore the importance of the nature and strength of participants' motivations, as well as the importance of religious identity in shaping self-reports of perceived sexual orientation change. Page 85. Given the findings of limited efficacy of change of sexual orientation, it is unlikely that SOCE provides any unique benefits other than those documented for the social support mechanisms of mutual help groups. Page 120. There are no studies of adequate scientific rigor to conclude whether or not recent SOCE do or do not work to change a person's sexual orientation. Scientifically rigorous older work in this area found that sexual orientation, i.e. erotic attractions and sexual arousal oriented to one sex or the other or both, was unlikely to change due to efforts designed for this purpose. Some individuals appeared to learn how to ignore or limit their attractions. However, this was much less likely to be true for people whose sexual attractions were initially limited to people of the same sex. Although sound data on the safety of SOCE are extremely limited, some individuals reported being harmed by SOCE. Distress and depression were exacerbated. Belief in the hope of sexual orientation change, followed by the failure of the treatment, was identified as a significant cause of distress and negative self-image. So, there's your evidence for the efficacy of sexual orientation change efforts. Do you have any other evidence you'd like to provide? Additionally, can you provide a reason for why someone would even want to change their sexual orientation which isn't based upon sexual stigma or minority stress? This is from pages 1 and 15 of the report. There is a growing body of evidence concluding that sexual stigma, manifested as prejudice and discrimination directed at non-heterosexual sexual orientations and identities, is a major source of stress for sexual minorities. This stress, known as minority stress, is a factor in mental health disparities found in some sexual minorities. Page 15. This is regarding the steps in sexual stigma. A. Individual differences are labeled. B. These differences are linked to undesirable traits or negative stereotypes. C. Labeled individuals are placed in distinct categories that separate them from the mainstream. D. Labeled persons experience discrimination and loss of status that lead to unequal access to social, economic, and political power. This inequality is a consequence of stigma and discrimination rather than of the differences themselves. And as long as you advocate sexual orientation change efforts which view homosexual people as inferior to heterosexual ones, and they do by implying that they need to change in the first place, you perpetuate the sexual stigma and minority stress of these individuals.